Minato is everyone's favorite Hokage. Well, almost everyone. He's the majority anyway. We know very little about him though. We only see him a few times in the series and only witness his feats of strength a few times overall. Despite how little we do know, he still ranks as one of the most popular characters in this series, and that's why we're here today. We're attempting to see what a world where Minato still lives looks like. This world is only one of many possibilities, but it has me spellbound. So let me sit right down and cook up the next chapter to his story. For those who haven't seen them already, there are 4 other parts to this story. Feel free to check them out if you haven't seen them all yet. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel to make sure that the next time you go to the grocery store, your favorite flavor of ice cream is on sale. Ring that bell too, and your favorite toppings will be on sale too. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. Minato stood in the Hokage's office and looked out over the village. He looked down into a small picture frame he was holding. It was an image of his family. It showed him standing there by Kushina, and standing before them, grin as wide as could be, was Naruto. The image was only partially real. Each person within it was real, but the scenario wasn't. A part of him desired to know what it was like to have his wife and son together with him at all times. So many pictures were sorted through, and via the magic of technology, they had edited the images together into a convincing family photo. While the scenario in which the image took place was fabricated, it was as real as anything else to Minato. As if all these pictures were specifically taken at different times before crossing the 4th dimension just to unify in one single moment. Love's radiance traveling the untouched chronological frontier just to bring comfort and peace to Minato. Of course, this really was nothing more than Photoshop, but it meant so much more to him. His thumb ran across the frame as he smiled. Kushina walked in. "How are you feeling?" she asked him. "Pretty good. A little frustrated though. We haven't learned anything about the Akatsuki. It's maddening. They know how to cover their tracks well. I have Jiraiya on the case. He's coordinating with the Anbu to at least put together a member list. Besides the man with the swirling mask, we've got nothing." She sighed. "You've been at this for a while. Perhaps you should take a break for a bit and let the intelligence team do its thing." Minato smiled. "I would certainly love to, but I have things that need to be made right. I need to get justice for you and Naruto." She walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist as she laid her chin on his shoulder. She sighed with relief, as if this were the only rest she could have as an Edo Tensei. He leaned his head over against hers, just enjoying the embrace. He smiled with a touch of melancholy, knowing that one day that touch would go away again. He wouldn't lie. Some nights, as she attempted to sleep despite not needing it, he would watch her as the night rolled on, and he would feel the tears escape his eyes as their hands clasped, knowing that he would one day lose that touch. But he knew that she would go on to Naruto, and that the two would be happy, and would wait for him. Perhaps that really nullified any form of fear in his heart. Fear of death. Not to say that he was suicidal, he just knew that better things were to come, so why fear? He would live every day as if it were his last, because he wasn't afraid for it to be. She gripped the picture frame with her hands as she looked down over his shoulders. What a beautiful picture. He smiled and sat it down. "It's not as beautiful as you," he said, turning around to face her. Their lips touched and gave form to the passionate fires burning within both of their hearts. But this moment was quickly ruined when a man rushed in. "Lord Fourth!" He stopped and blushed, seeing the Hokage kiss his wife. The Anbu ninja took a step back before going down to one knee and bowing in respect for his superior. "Pardon, Lord Hokage, but I have important news." Minato turned to look. "What is it?" The Anbu agent looked up. "The 4th Kazekage, Gaara, has been kidnapped by the Akatsuki. We received word from the administration there. They're requesting help." Minato thought back on it. Gaara was a true firebrand during the Chunin exams, ruthless and uncaring. To think that he now would rule as Kazekage. Minato would have assumed that Gaara would have driven Suna into the ground, and perhaps he had, and nobody there was willing to admit it. After all, why else would the prideful shinobi of the sand beg for help from their greatest rival of all? Minato nodded. "Thank you for the update." The Anbu agent saluted and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Minato turned to Kushina. "I suppose we should get a move on. We need to rescue Gaara. It will certainly help our standing with Suna, but further, it will allow us to learn more of the Akatsuki." Kushina nodded. "I'll grab my gear." He turned and left to coordinate with his team. He needed to put together a special squad, so that's exactly what he did. He would invite both Kakashi Hatake and Might Guy onto his team. He would further call upon Itachi Uchiha, whose Choku Tomoe Sharingan would prove invaluable. Behind him, Kushina would walk in wearing a flak jacket of her own. She would walk up and join the briefing. Once this was accomplished, they would set off for the village. They'd pass through the land of rivers before passing into the land of wind. They'd make their way to Sunagakure by passing over the dunes. Their trek brought them to Suna, where they stepped in. The villagers all eyed them strangely, as if to say they were unwelcome, but none of them seemed to receive the stares of death worse than Kakashi. "It seems your father, Sakamo, has left a big impression on the people," Minato said as they went a little deeper. They would eventually find Temari. She was standing there, watching the doctors attempt to heal Kankuro, who had been poisoned. He cried out in agony as they worked. Minato stepped up to her. "Is he okay? What happened?" Temari would look up to Minato. "He fought to defend Gaara, but he was poisoned by another puppet master, a master of the Akatsuki. The doctors don't know what to make of it. Without a sample of the poison, it becomes impossible for us to treat him." Minato looked on. He then turned to face Temari again. "Well, we're here to rescue Gaara. It should be possible for us to get a sample of the poison and bring it back here to you. All we need is a location and we'll be on our way. Time is of the essence." She nodded. She pulled out a map and marked the location where their spies had tracked the Akatsuki and Gaara. Furthermore, she sent Chiyo. Minato would take it and be on his way. As they walked on through the desert wastelands, Minato looked at the map. "What do you think they want with the Kazekage?" Might Guy asks. Minato looks back. They want his tailed beast. They killed Kushina and Naruto by taking theirs. Might Guy seemed even more confused. "But why are they collecting them all? One should be enough, especially if it's the Nine Tails. What do you think they want with the others?" Minato shrugged. "I don't know." It was then that a lone figure was seen standing before them. Minato looked up and noted the black cloak with red clouds on it. He was an Akatsuki member. The man smiled, his visage not too unlike that of a shark. Minato held his hand back to stop the others who just now noticed him. Minato called out, "Who are you?" The man offered a slight bow. "I am Kisame Hoshigaki. It's a pleasure to meet you." Minato stood there silently for a moment, measuring his next words carefully. "Where is Gaara?" Kisame smiled. "Just up ahead. He's with two compatriots of mine, but good luck getting to them." He unwrapped his blade. The blade growled and snarled, its teeth snapping at Minato and his team. Samehada, the sentient blade of the 7 ninja swordsmen. Might Guy would step forward. "I'll take this guy. I've got a score to settle with the 7 ninja swordsmen. I want to prove my father right." Minato would nod. They'd rush off, leaving Might Guy alone against Kisame. Minato and his team rushed forward, racing toward the location on their map. Reaching a cave covered by a seal, they worked to undo it before stepping in. There they would find Deidara and Sasori standing over the corpse of Gaara, his beast already taken. Minato would grip his kunai as Kushina would speak. "His beast is already taken. Gaara is gone. But we still have a chance to stop the Akatsuki from claiming the beast. We just need to hurry." Minato nodded. They had no words to say, nothing to try to reason with the Akatsuki. They just raced forward. Minato targeted Sasori as he ran, identifying him as the puppet master that had poisoned Kankuro. Kushina stayed close to him as a Rasengan formed in Minato's hand. Minato would jump into the air and bring his Rasengan down onto the back of Sasori, shattering his back. However, this merely revealed that he was protected by a shell. Hiroko. From within, a rather youthful boy with red hair appeared. Despite what Chiyo had told them of Sasori, he seemed far too young to be the one before them. He stood up and summoned his puppets to defend himself. Minato would throw his kunai at Sasori, which the shinobi would defend himself from. It was then that Sasori was revealed to be a puppet himself, a person who had transformed himself into a puppet. He used his body's secret compartments and weapons to attack Minato with poisoned wires. Kushina got in the way and pushed them to the side. She used her ability to sense chakra and emotions to find out where there were organic parts. Unlike most creatures whose chakra radiated from a deep pool in their stomach, this puppet radiated out from a pool in its chest, from which emotions were also present. She assumed that this was his heart. She lunged for it with her claws out, but suddenly she was caught by the wiring from Sasori. "Even the Nine Tails isn't capable of defeating this many puppets, but I'm curious, how do you possess the Nine Tails when Tobi previously stripped it from the blonde child?" As he spoke, Minato suddenly appeared before him. Sasori's eyes widened, wondering how he got between him and Kushina. Kushina still possessing the seal that kept Kurama inside, and within that seal was Minato's Flying Raijin formula, which he used to close the gap instantly. With one quick thrust, he shoved his kunai into Sasori's chest, piercing his heart. Sasori stumbled back and looked down at the blade, having passed through the only organic part of him remaining. He laughed a little. Such a simple end for the master of puppets. He fell to his knees. Chiyo came to him. It was then that she revealed him to be her grandson. Minato turned away and gave the two their privacy. He looked over and found that Itachi and Kakashi had captured Deidara, alive, but the body of Gaara remained, and the One Tail was nowhere to be found. Minato lamented their failed objective, but he harvested some of the poison Sasori had used against them and placed it into a vial. After Chiyo returned once more, she explained her part in Gaara's demise, the guilt she possessed in having been the one to turn him into a monster. She likened him to Sasori and made mention that she had failed to save 2 innocent children from becoming monsters. It was then that she decided to give Gaara another chance, to replace that which she had stolen from him. She believed that she had lived long enough and decided to use her own technique to bring him back to life, which worked but left her lifeless on the ground. Gaara seemed confused. Minato would then lead him back to Suna after picking up Guy, whose battle had ended in an impasse, and he'd present Gaara to his worried sister and gave the poison he had harvested to the doctors, who could begin working on a cure to save the life of the slowly dying Kankuro. They'd be asked to stay for a celebratory dinner, but Minato would deny this, mentioning their prisoner that they needed to question as soon as possible. And so, the group returns to Konoha with Deidara. Deidara is immediately detained, and the special torture and interrogation unit of Konoha begin their work. They try as much as they can to get him to talk, all while Kushina and Minato watch from the windows, but nothing they can think of works. The head interrogator, Ibiki Marino, seems stumped, believing it to be an impossible task. Kushina then asks for a chance to interrogate him. Ibiki lets her try, but doesn't believe it'll work. She steps in as Ibiki attempts to come up with some new persuasion technique. Minato would point to Kushina through the one-way mirror who's leaning over Deidara. She slowly goes to the man's ear and whispers. Suddenly, Deidara's smile disappears. Kushina continues to whisper horrors into his ear. She raises her upturned hand in front of his face to show him what she would do. Deidara's eyes go wide as his face goes pale. He begins speaking quickly and ferociously. Kushina stands and smiles, patting the puff on the back of Deidara's head before returning. Minato and Ibiki would look to her in shock as she then spoke. The Akatsuki are based out of Amagi. It seems that their leader is a man named Pain, and that the swirly masked man isn't the leader. They have a statue that they're putting the tailed beasts into. They haven't put the Nine Tails in yet because they're afraid it'll overload it, so they're waiting to get the others. Minato and Ibiki were stunned. She turned around and began to walk away. Minato followed her, heading to his office alongside her. "You amaze me," he said, closing the door behind him. Minato came to his desk and opened the drawer and pulled out a map. He marked it. Amagakure is right here. He circled it with a marker. It's halfway between Suna and Iwa. She looked it over. That place became one of the battlegrounds for the Second Shinobi World War, didn't it? Minato nodded. It's been a popular battlefield for a while. Its current leader is a man named Hanzo. This is becoming a national emergency. Konoha is no longer the only one involved. Suna was attacked. There are other tailed beasts out there to be taken. I can think of quite a few. We need to inform Kumogakure that their Jinchuriki are being targeted by the Akatsuki. I believe we should probably convene a summit to speak of this new threat. At the very least, we need Iwa and Suna on our side. I know Suna will be willing to help as they were the last to be attacked. Iwa is still a bit iffy though. Their current Tsuchikage is an ornery old man with a will strong as steel, and a stubborn nature that would even make an ox blush. I need some spies to get into Ame. I need someone to scope it out. I need to know if Hanzo is aware of what's going on or if he's involved in any way. He could prove to be a valuable ally if he's willing to help us. I need you, Jiraiya, and Itachi to go in. I'll go get them together. Minato nodded. She would gather up Itachi and Jiraiya. She told them to ditch any unneeded gear, such as flak jackets and headbands. After all, they were going undercover. And so, they began to make their long trek across the Land of Fire, until eventually making their way to the endless deluge of the village hidden in the rain. They couldn't get in through the gate as it was specifically stated that Hanzo refused to let anyone come or go without direct permission. Kushina, Itachi, and Jiraiya then decided to enter another way. They climbed along the bottom of the bridge until they were close enough to find the sewage pipe leading out. As disgusting as it was, they used that to get in, coming up from a manhole cover. They entered the village. After quickly cleaning up, the three hit the town to see if they could find some more information. Itachi was integral to this process, as his Sharingan allowed him to invade the minds of others, and force them to tell him whatever he wanted to know, including any information on the Akatsuki or any information on anyone who would know. While Jiraiya and Itachi continued to investigate, Kushina decided to confront Hanzo personally. She found the residence where the leader of Ame was supposed to be, but instead of going in through the front, she decided to scale the building using her chakra and make her way to the top. The floor where Hanzo was located was strangely abandoned, void of any guards. She could easily make her way through there. Coming to the door, she stopped for a moment and opened it. Within was not Hanzo, but two people wearing the cloud-patterned coats. She considered fleeing, but another bearing the same coat closed the door behind her. She was caught. The one behind her bid her to come forward. She stepped closer. She looked behind her to see the man clearly. He had strange piercings on his face. The Akatsuki are truly gothic, aren't they? Never a smile, always the black robes, black piercings, and black nail polish. Why can't you be happy? The one sitting in the chair spoke. How can anyone be happy when they know only pain? Kushina looked at him. No way, you really are gothic. The world's being threatened by a bunch of edgelords. The man didn't seem amused, but then again, that was never the point. So where's Hanzo of the lizard guts or whatever? I kinda need to talk to him about a group of very naughty children that have been taking things that aren't theirs. The orange-haired man just blinked, remaining reserved and uncaring. Kushina couldn't help but wonder if he was trying to act like this to be cool, or if he really was as dark and tortured as he put himself off to be. The man spoke. Hanzo is dead, he said flatly. Kushina cocked her head. Oh, since when? 3 years ago. Kushina thought about it. Hanzo had been dead for 3 years and none of the other villages had heard anything about it? Kushina sighed and put her hands in her pockets. Normally such an action would result in the other getting defensive, but this wasn't the case. Both beings knew that they were immortal, so there was no reason why either should bother attempting to stop the other. Kushina blew a dripping strand of hair from her face. It seems you were ready for me. The man sat there, his hand still holding up his head with his fist. I knew you were here the moment that you, the Uchiha, and Jiraiya walked in. Kushina seemed startled by that, but she quickly regained her composure. Nothing happens in Ame without you knowing, does it? Pain seemed to look her up and down. You seem rather intelligent when compared to the other spies the nations have sent, but at the same time you're reckless. It seems you possess an immortal body, which could explain it. She pretended to blush. I was waiting to see if you would notice, senpai. She took a deep breath and then exhaled. Why are you doing this? What's the goal? Power? Fame? Riches? Is this the cliché conquest of the world goal that every supervillain and their mother desires? Please enlighten me with the hour-long monologue you have prepared. The man said a single word. Peace. Kushina looked at him with confusion. What? The man spoke. My dream is to bring peace to this world, to save lives from the terror of war. Kushina grit her teeth. Save lives, she said, faking a smile. Aren't you taking lives? A necessary cost, the man said. We take their lives to save others. He leaned forward. I can see that you have suffered a great pain as well. By my hands, no doubt. Your energy possesses a similar composition to the Ninetales in my possession. I assume you were close to the Jinchuriki we killed. Kushina attempted to hide her emotions. He was my son. Pain sat back in his chair. I see. You must hold an unbearable hatred for me in your heart. Smiling through a scowl, she spoke. I do. Pain sighed. This is what I'm using the beasts for. I want peace, but peace isn't a natural state we humans can maintain. I plan to teach them what true pain is. I want to ruin them on war. I want them to know what it is to feel pain. In that way, they'll renounce war altogether, and we'll finally have peace. Kushina shook her head. You truly are so ignorant. We're going to stop you, you know. Pain shook his head. Don't be so sure. It's not like you're capable of telling anyone else. Not so long as you're still in this village. And now that you know, none of you will be able to leave. My other paths of pain are currently ambushing your friends. Surrender now and maybe I'll spare their lives. She thought for a moment. Nope. She rushed at him, forming a tailed beast bomb in her hand. Suddenly, she was struck with an invisible force that sent her flying out the door. Pain tapped a button on his console and informed the guards of a rogue spy in the building. The alarms began to go off as Kushina rushed off. She made her way down the stairs. As she did, she heard Shinobi coming up and saw Shinobi coming down. She ran through the building. She would keep running. Having nowhere else to go, she threw a tailed beast ball into a window, shattering it and jumping out to run across the roof. As she ran, she would look over her shoulder to see the animal path coming up from behind her. She kept making her way off towards Jiraiya and Itachi, sensing them with the powers granted her by the Ninetales. She would jump from rooftop to rooftop. She would see the form of a Susanoo rise against the skyline. She kept making her way towards it as the animal path would summon a centipede to come after her. The animal path looked down on her as its centipede began to give chase. Kushina eventually made it to Itachi and Jiraiya's location. There she helped them fight against the other 4 paths of pain until she held something into the air. A piece of paper. Something Minato had given her. We need out now, she said. Having Itachi and Jiraiya grab onto her shoulder, she put the seal on the ground and activated it with her blood. This would initiate a reverse summoning jutsu that would teleport them back to the leaf, leaving the paths of pain behind to watch. The paths would look at each other for a moment before heading back to the Supreme Leader's residence. Kushina would rush into Minato's office and explain it all to him. Minato just sat there. Hanzo's dead? Jiraiya would lean against the doorframe. It surprised me too. Hanzo was an incredibly powerful ninja, but after facing these new enemies, I can understand. Minato nodded. Well, I've set up a summit, and I plan to go to it shortly. We'll discuss this with the other Kage. Kushina stood there. "Let me go with you." Minato shook his head. "You just got back from a mission. You need your rest." Kushina rolled her eyes. "I'm undead, Minato. I don't need rest." Minato thought about it for a second and then relented. "Alright, fine." Together they got ready for the meeting. They journeyed quite a ways to the Land of Iron, where they would proceed to have a meeting with the other Kage. Curiously, the Raikage was absent. Minato would ask about this, and the other Kage had no answer for him. They decided to begin the summit without the Raikage, and as they spoke, Minato shared all the information that he had, coming to realize how many of the other nations had already lost their tailed beasts and refused to say anything about it. Was it foolish pride, refusing to inform others of their faults, or was it overconfidence in believing that they could handle it alone? Minato assumed it to be both. And so, as the debates continued, none of the other Kage would budge, each one wondering why they would need to work together at all. To them, the Akatsuki were a non-threat. Even if they managed to take their tailed beasts, what could a single group of 10 people do? Minato had an ally in this debate in the form of Gaara, who vouched for Minato's words, but even still, this was falling on deaf ears. But suddenly, a messenger appeared before them with urgent news. Kumogakure had been attacked and destroyed, their tailed beasts stolen. The entire room fell silent in awe. Kushina tugged on Minato's haori. That's 9. They have all the tailed beasts. Minato nodded. Do you now see the threat the Akatsuki pose? And with that, they have all 9 of the tailed beasts. Are you certain that you wouldn't like to join forces? The other Kage thought for a moment before nodding. "We will accept this momentary alliance to deal with the threat of the Akatsuki," the Tsuchikage would say. It was then that they would hold a vote for who the leader of the allied shinobi forces should be. All Kage voted for themselves, all except for Gaara, who trusted Minato's judgment and voted for him. With that, Minato was the leader of the allied shinobi forces, his first decree being that they should get ready to attack Ame and take back what was lost. For the next couple days, they rallied their forces and began to march. They surrounded Ame and began to force themselves in. A massive battle began to take place. The 4 Kage and Kushina all led their forces against the well-fortified forces of Ame, which was being led by the 6 Paths of Pain. This wasn't as one-sided as you might think. The village of Ame was large and tightly packed, meaning that a small number of forces could be easily used to defend against a larger force. Besides that, Ame's shinobi were in their element. The only village that could really keep up with Ame was Kiri, and with the appearance of the Paths of Pain, the battle almost seemed to be taking a turn for the worse. All the while, in a secret base the Akatsuki used, Nagato and Konan stood before the Geto statue. With their great power, they managed to force the final tailed beast into the statue and it began to transform. Immediately after this, however, Konan goes up in flames, the biggest weakness of her paper bombs technique. Before Nagato had the chance to see what was happening, a blade passed through his chest. Toby stood there behind him. "Did you really think I would give you command of my dreams? That I wouldn't try to take it all back the moment you were of no further use? No. I don't care about your pain. I'm going to alleviate my own pain the way I want, and you can just die." He would then remove the left Rinnegan from Nagato's head and fit it into an empty eye socket in his own. He felt the power coursing through him. As the Ten Tails rose, he laughed as he used his Kamui to get to the upper levels. As Minato and Kushina fought the 6 Paths of Pain, they noticed that they bore a look of pain and confusion on their face before falling over dead. Minato was confused by this, but suddenly from the ground burst a massive creature, the Ten Tails. He saw it. The man with the swirly mask rose up and landed on the beast's head. He slowly removed his mask and dropped it to the ground. "No more disguises," he said, "and no more games." He turned to face Minato and Kushina. Minato thought his heart had stopped. He looked up at the man atop the Ten Tails and realized it immediately. "Obito." The man smiled. "Hello, Minato-sensei. Welcome to the end of the world, and the start of something new." Minato growled in anger, hurt by his betrayal. "How could you do this? I loved you. How could you do this to me, Obito?" Obito crossed his arms. "The boy you knew died a long time ago, Minato-sensei. I am what remains. I am all that's left. A shell filled with sorrow. The world took me, chewed me up, and spat me back out. If the world will reject me, then I'll reject the world and make a better one. You're free to join if you desire. I'll make a world just for you. A world where Kushina and Naruto are both alive." Minato began to run at him. Seeing the foolish Hokage racing to his own doom, Obito shook his head and began to seal the Ten Tails into himself. Once he had gained control of it, Obito sent a truth-seeking orb into the sky above and burst it, tearing apart the clouds and showing a bright blue sky, something Ame had not seen in a long time. Obito, now possessing 6 Paths chakra, declared him the new Sage of 6 Paths, and declared that he would be a god of destruction and a god of creation. After all, how could he create anything new if he did not first wipe away the old? With a swipe of his hand, the allied shinobi forces were knocked from their feet. Minato kept charging at him. Kushina stood there in awe. How could sweet little Obito become this monster? Within herself, Kurama spoke. He will use the Ten Tails to destroy the world. He'll cast it under the infinite Tsukiyomi. He doesn't know what this means though. The world will be under Genjutsu, but it will end, as the Ten Tails is more than a weapon. It's a parasite designed to feed on all the chakra in the world, rendering it a dead planet. We must stop him. Kurama then mixed his chakra with Kushina's, allowing her to take on Kurama chakra mode. She would rush forward and race to Minato's side as Obito fired chakra rods at them. She told Minato what Kurama had told her, leaving Minato speechless. He looked back and began to continue running. They both raced up a building and jumped down from it to strike Obito from 2 different directions, but he sent them flying down. Minato hit the ground. Kushina entered her tailed beast mode while Minato used wood release to drag him down. He then summoned Nue from within to attack Obito, but it was knocked back when Obito made use of wood release to get himself free. Obito then summoned the god tree from within his body, which he then used to decimate the area with tailed beast bombs. Much of the allied shinobi forces, as well as the Ame forces, were destroyed by this single assault. Minato and Kushina would fight to not get blown away, with Kurama being the one keeping Kushina stable, and Nue being the one holding Minato. Minato would then hold out his Rasengan and enter Sage mode to boost his strength and would have Nue launch him. He would strike Obito, which would do damage. It was then that Minato realized that for some reason, Obito could not nullify Sage techniques like regular ninjutsu. This time, supplementing all of their attacks with Sage Chakra, which began to give them the upper hand. They would eventually come to the point where they could rip the Ten Tails out, but this was no easy feat. It became a battle of wills, and this battle was held within their minds. Minato and Kushina stood across from Obito in their subconscious. Minato looked around curiously for a moment before looking back at Obito. "Why did you do this, Obito? We all thought you were dead." Obito laughed a little. "I am dead, sensei. I died a long time ago. I began the process of dying when that rock crushed me. And where were you to save me? I was in agony. Whether I lived or died made no difference. I just didn't want to be alone." Minato stepped forward. "Obito, I didn't know you were still alive. If I'd known, I would have come back for you." Obito's smile began to turn to anger. "You didn't even check." Minato motioned to himself. "I couldn't. You were behind enemy lines." "Don't lie, Minato. I've seen you obliterate entire armies all by yourself. You could have retrieved me. You didn't. And because you didn't, I was found by Madara, who imparted his designs upon me before he died." Minato was a little stunned. "Madara?" Obito continued. "Madara was the one who found me and cared for me. He was the one who healed me. But what was even worse than that was the death of Rin. Where were you?" Minato was speechless. Obito's anger got the better of him. "Where were you?" Minato looked down in shame. "I was on another mission." Obito stood there. "The day Rin died was the day I died too. When I needed you the most, you were never around. Why weren't you ever around? Too busy? Too busy for me, too busy for Naruto." That last thing struck a chord in Minato. "I was always too busy. I was always so fast, known as the Yellow Flash, but for those who loved me most, I was never quick enough to save them." Obito shook his head in disgust. "I hated you. You were the one I looked up to the most. I would have died for you. I did die for you, and you just let it happen and forgot me." Kushina stepped forward. "He never forgot about you, Obito." He looked to her as she spoke. "I saw him. I saw the real Minato, the one hidden from everyone. When he told me you died, he burst into tears. He blamed himself then as you blame him now, and when Rin died, he almost collapsed with guilt. I'll never forget what he told me when he heard it. I wasn't fast enough. He carried that with him for so long." Minato stepped forward. "For so long, I wanted to apologize. For being a crappy mentor, for being a horrible friend, for failing you on every possible level. I truly am sorry, Obito. What you are, what you've become, it's my fault." He stepped forward. "I am so sorry." He hugged his former student. Obito was shocked by this. Minato sniffled. "I wanted you to replace me one day." Obito was shocked. "Me? What about Kakashi, the golden boy?" Minato shook his head. "Kakashi had skill, but he didn't have heart. Not like you. Kakashi's well-rounded now, but that's only because you made him so. I wanted you to be the 5th Hokage, Minato. I saw how hard you worked, how strong you were in body and mind. I knew you would one day surpass Kakashi, surpass me. I wanted to save you from the pain of loss, help you grow, but I wasn't strong enough or worthy of being your mentor. And when you cried out for me as you were being crushed, I wasn't fast enough." Kushina walked up. "I was the one who delivered the news of Rin's death to her parents. I saw how they cried. It hurt. I lost my parents at a young age. I knew what it was to lose someone so close to you. I'm sorry. She hugged him. Why are you hugging me? He asked. Get off. I'm not the same person you knew. Don't you remember, Minato? I killed Kushina. I ripped the Nine Tails out of Naruto and killed him. Your son is dead because of me. Minato shook his head. No, Obito, I forgive you. Obito was confused. Forgive me? But I took away your reason to live. You should hate me. Minato squeezed tighter as a tear dripped from Obito's cheek. Hate me. Hate me, Minato-sensei. I'm a monster. A murderer. I've killed so many and plan to kill more. Just hate me. Minato instead held tighter to him. No, I forgive you. Suddenly, in reality, as Kushina and Minato stood there, gripping the tailed beasts they were trying to rip out of Obito, they looked to each other and then back to Obito and let go, letting the tailed beasts return to him. They all lowered to the ground. Obito was confused. Why? Why are you sparing me? I killed your son. Minato sighed. When Kushina died, people called me Death's Hokage. They called me Lord Death because I brought pain and suffering upon everyone I touched. But now I see that I truly had been. You and Rin were the first victims of my failures, but I don't want to be that way anymore. I won't fight you, Obito. I won't kill you. Minato took a kunai and put it into Obito's hands. If you hate me, then I don't blame you. If you need someone to blame for Rin's death, blame me, but don't hurt the world for my mistakes. He then opened his flak jacket to allow him to stab him. Obito gripped the blade tightly. Looking upon Minato, he saw Rin and her death playing over and over again in his mind. He raised the blade and screamed as he brought it down. Minato stood there, his eyes closed as this occurred, but all went silent. He opened his eyes to see Obito collapsed upon his chest. Sensei, I'm sorry. They came to their knees as Minato hugged Obito. I'm sorry. If only I had attempted to save you. I thought you were dead and didn't even dare to check. For that, I'm sorry. Kushina came down to his side and hugged him as well. Obito opened his eyes. I'm sorry. I want to make amends. I need to make amends. Obito closed his eyes and suddenly he utilized his abilities to revive all of those he'd killed during the war. But on top of that, a light surrounded Kushina as she found herself revived. She looked down at herself and then up at Minato. Minato smiled. You're alive. Suddenly, Minato felt a small set of arms wrap around him from behind. He turned to look. His eyes lit up as tears began to spill forth. Naruto! He turned around and held his son and cradled him in his arms. Is this a dream? Tell me this is a dream. Obito shook his head. No, I failed you, mentor. There's only one way for me to make amends now. Obito pulled a blade out and held it in front of his stomach. He was prepared to commit harakiri, but Kushina gripped his hand. No, if you wish to make amends, then you should do so while living. And with that, the Fourth Shinobi World War came to an end. Minato reported the end, stating that the Ten Tails and Pain had been destroyed, not telling anyone that the Ten Tails and its Jinchuriki had been taken in by Konoha. Minato pardoning Obito's actions with the stipulation that he used his power and his freedom to protect the world. That being said, Minato did decide to step down. The role of Hokage had just become too much to bear. Despite his young age, his hair was already turning white, and so he would sign a resignation. He would declare to the world alongside his family that he was stepping down. In his place, he chose Itachi to replace him. Itachi became the first Uchiha Hokage, and the pride of the Uchiha clan. Meanwhile, Minato and his family moved deeper into the village where they took up a house to spend the rest of their time together. The alarm clock went off. Minato tapped it to shut off the alarm. He would then roll over to see Kushina there. He would kiss her nose to wake her up. Coo. Her eyes would open. Mean. He smiled at her. It's time to get up. She nodded. Together they got up and started on breakfast. He sat there and sipped on his coffee as an orange blur rushed past. He looked up from his paper to see Naruto, sandwich stuffed into his mouth. I'm late. I'm off to report to Kakashi-sensei. Minato giggled. He's so quick, but somehow he's never on time. Kushina looked back at him. Huh, I wonder where he gets it from. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Minato stood and answered. What did you forget this time, Naruto? He retracted that question when he saw Jiraiya. Oh, hey Jiraiya. Jiraiya smiled. Hope I'm not intruding. I brought everything we would need. Kushina looked back. What are you going to do? Minato looked back and smiled. I'm going to write an autobiography with Jiraiya's help. Jiraiya smiled. Yeah, I think the future generations could stand to look back on the Fourth Hokage's hardships and learn something from it. I predict that it'll become a Land of Fire bestseller. Jiraiya came in. He sat down at the table with his paper. First of all, we're gonna need a title. Something to catch the reader's eye. Any ideas? Minato sat there and thought for a second before smiling. He looked at Jiraiya. What about Yondaime, when curses become blessings? Jiraiya smiled. Sounds appropriate. And so they began to write. Minato then reflected on the hardships that it had took him to get to this point, but he realized as he did that his life truly had been blessed. And because of the hardships he had to face, the world was now safe and at peace. The curse had been broken. Perhaps it had never been a curse in the first place. Without these things, the world would no longer be around. He took a sip of his coffee. Let's start with chapter 1. Quick, but never on time. And that's it, folks. That's the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed it. I thought that this little experiment with Minato was quite the thrill ride. It had me laughing, had me crying some more. But above all, it was a fun story to follow. I hope you all liked it. Don't be shy to tell us what you would like to see in the future, too. I'm always eager to hear your ideas.
Did you enjoy our video? Well, then be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi. And make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.